The rain came down like judgment on my mother's funeral, each drop hammering the desert clay until it turned to soup beneath our feet. Black umbrellas crowded under the gray November sky, water streaming off their edges like tears nobody wanted to claim. The sound of earth clattering onto Marina's coffin mixed with the choked sobs of a handful of relatives I'd barely recognized anymore. Tías and primos who'd driven up from Las Cruces, their faces weathered by years and disappointment. I stood there, in my only decent suit, the one she'd bought me for job interviews that never panned out, my heart heavy as the storm clouds overhead. The pain tore through my chest like a wrench slipping off a bolt, leaving me almost numb. How could I possibly go on living when Marina, my mother, the woman who'd taught me everything from kitchen table accounting to changing brake pads, was gone forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Father Mackenzie's words blurred together with the rainfall, something about dust to dust and eternal rest. I fixed my eyes on the funeral home's van parked near the cemetery gates, its white paint too bright against the bruised sky. Something nagged at me about those plates. They didn't match the other vehicles in Cassie Quinn's fleet. Brand new tags, but the van looked worn around the edges. That's when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. Who texts during a funeral? But the screen lit up through the rain-blurred case with a number I didn't recognize. 7 digits, local area code. My thumb moved without permission, swiping to read the message that would turn my world inside out. I'm alive. Don't trust your dad. My entire body froze. My hands started trembling so violently I nearly dropped the phone into the mud. The words burned into my retinas. I'm alive. My heart seemed to stop beating entirely, then kicked back to life with a vengeance that left me dizzy. Who sent this? Could it really be? No, impossible. I'd watched them close the casket 3 days ago. I'd signed papers at Cassie's funeral home, approved the cremation schedule, picked out the flowers that were now getting beaten to mulch by the storm. But if Marina was truly alive, then who was lying in that coffin? And more importantly, who had orchestrated this whole thing? I pocketed the phone before anyone could see, my mind reeling through possibilities that all sounded insane. Marina was dead. I'd held her hand in the hospital bed. I'd watched the machines flatline. I'd identified the body at Cassie's mortuary, hadn't I? The memory felt fuzzy around the edges, soft-focused like an old photograph. The viewing was closed casket at Dale's insistence. He wouldn't want people seeing her like that. She was always so proud of how she looked. But Marina was never vain. She'd worn the same denim jacket for 15 years, laughed at women who spent fortunes on makeup. Pride for her came from balancing books to the penny and teaching me that numbers never lied, only the people writing them down.
Lucky nudged my hand with his wet nose, and I realized we were alone, except for the gravediggers waiting under a nearby cottonwood. The rain was letting up, revealing patches of desert stretching toward the Sandia Mountains. Everything looked washed clean except for the questions multiplying in my head like weeds after a storm. Don't trust your dad. That part hurt worse than the resurrection claim. Dale Ridge might be a lot of things. Gambler, schemer, occasional drunk. But he was my father. He'd taught me to rebuild carburetors and throw a decent right hook. We'd kept the shop running together through repo threats and collection calls, through Marina's medical bills and his own bad decisions. But looking back at the funeral home van pulling away, watching Dale's taillights disappear into the gray afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been watching a performance, that everything from the timing of Marina's death to today's rain-soaked ceremony had been choreographed by someone who knew exactly which strings to pull. My phone buzzed again. Same number. Storage Unit 247, Taos. Combination in the lullabies. By evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the neon signs along Central Avenue bleeding colored light onto the wet asphalt. I sat in my truck outside Cassie's funeral home, watching her lock up for the night, my mind still spinning from the second text. Combination in the lullabies. What the hell did that mean? Marina used to sing me to sleep when I was little. Old Mexican ballads her grandmother had taught her, full of minor keys and lost loves. But codes hidden in children's songs? It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life in Albuquerque, where the biggest conspiracy was usually which city councilman was skimming from the road budget. Still, I needed to start somewhere, and Cassie Quinn was the closest thing to a straight answer I was likely to get tonight. I caught her just as she was loading files into her sedan, her umbrella forgotten in the rush to get dry. "Cassie, wait up!" She turned, startled, clutching a manila folder to her chest. "Evan, I'm sorry, honey, if this is about payment arrangements." "It's not about money." I stepped closer, letting the streetlight catch my face so she could see I wasn't angry. "I just need to ask you something about Marina's paperwork. There's a rosary missing from her things, and I thought maybe—" The lie came easy, smooth as Dale at his best. Cassie's shoulders relaxed slightly. She'd always had a soft spot for grieving families, especially ones who paid their bills on time. "Of course. Come on inside before we both catch pneumonia." The funeral home after hours felt different, less solemn, more like any other small business struggling to make ends meet. Fluorescent lights hummed over cheap carpeting, and the air smelled of industrial disinfectant instead of lilies. Cassie led me to her cramped office behind the viewing rooms, gesturing to a folding chair while she unlocked a filing cabinet. "I remember that rosary," she said, rifling through folders. "Beautiful piece. Turquoise and silver, right? Your mother wore it every time she came in to make arrangements." Every time. That was news to me. I thought Marina had only visited once, maybe twice, to handle the pre-need contract. But Cassie was talking like they'd been regular coffee dates. "Here we go." She pulled out a thick folder labeled Ridge, Marina S., and set it on the desk between us. "Let me just check the personal effects inventory." While she flipped through pages, I found myself reading upside down, a skill Marina had taught me for reading mechanic estimates and insurance adjusters' reports. Most of it was standard funeral home boilerplate, but one form caught my eye, a cremation authorization with timestamps that didn't quite line up. "Cassie, can I ask you something? This transfer time here, it says Marina was moved from the hospice at 11:47 p.m., but the death certificate shows she passed at 1:15 a.m.? How does that work?" She looked up, her pen frozen over the inventory sheet. "Oh, that. Sometimes there are logistical complications, especially with Our Lady of the Desert. They have this new intake system, very efficient, but the paperwork doesn't always sync up perfectly." "New intake system?" That phrase sent a chill down my spine. Lucky's hackles rising at the hospice van, Dale whispering with Raina, and now mysterious timing discrepancies. "What kind of complications?" I asked, keeping my voice casual while my eyes scanned more of the folder's contents. "Nothing unusual, just, well, you know how it is with insurance and Medicaid. Sometimes bodies have to be moved before all the paperwork clears, especially if there's a donation involved." Donation? The word came out sharper than I intended. Marina didn't donate her body. "No, of course not. I just meant sometimes there are mix-ups in the system. Bodies get tagged for research or organ donation by mistake, and then we have to sort it out later."
She was lying. Not well, but consistently, which meant she'd practiced this explanation before. I leaned forward, letting some of Dale's old intimidation tactics creep into my posture. "Cassie, I need to see the cremation logs, not the authorization, the actual retort records." "Evan, I don't think—" "Please." I softened my voice, played the grieving son card. I just need to know she was handled with respect. You understand. After a long moment, she pulled out another folder, this one marked Cremation Log November. The pages were filled with weights, temperatures, processing times. I found Marina's entry and felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. Ridge, Marina S., tag 2847, gross weight, blank, net weight, blank, ash weight, 2.1 pounds. No body weight recorded before cremation, just the final ash measurement, which could have come from anywhere. Or anyone. Cassie? Where's my mother? She closed the folder with trembling hands. Evan, you're upset. It's normal to have questions after. Where is she? The silence stretched between us like a held breath. Finally, Cassie pulled out another folder, this one marked Cremation Log November. The pages were filled with weights, temperatures, processing times. I found Marina's entry and felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. Ridge, Marina S., tag 2847, gross weight, blank, net weight, blank, ash weight, 2.1 pounds. No body weight recorded before cremation, just the final ash measurement, which could have come from anywhere. Or anyone. Cassie, I said quietly, where's my mother? She closed the folder with trembling hands. Evan, you're upset. It's normal to have questions after. Where is she? The silence stretched between us like a held breath. Finally, Cassie pulled out a business card from her desk drawer and slid it across to me. Rio Mesa Research Logistics, with an address off I-25. Sometimes, she whispered, when families can't afford full arrangements, we have to work with outside contractors. It's all legitimate, fully licensed, but the paperwork can get complex. I pocketed the card along with Marina's rosary, which Cassie had quietly slipped from the personal effects bag. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because your father specifically requested we handle everything quietly. Said you were having hard enough time without getting bogged down in administrative details. Dale, again. Every trail led back to him, just like the text had warned. I stood up, my legs unsteady. Thank you for being honest with me. Evan, Cassie called as I reached the door. Be careful who you ask these questions to. Not everyone in this business is as understanding as I am. Outside, Lucky was waiting by the truck, his tail thumping against the wet pavement. As I approached, he suddenly perked up and trotted over to sniff the rosary in my hand. His reaction was immediate, whining, pawing at my pocket, circling with the kind of excitement he usually reserved for Marina's return from grocery shopping. The scent was still there, fresh enough to recognize, strong enough to matter. Marina had been wearing this rosary recently, more recently than 3 days ago when they'd supposedly closed her casket. I sat in the truck for a long time, listening to the rain start up again, watching neon signs flicker on and off like uncertain promises. The business card felt heavy in my pocket, heavier than the rosary that smelled like my mother's perfume. Combination in the lullabies. Whatever Marina had hidden in those songs, whatever trail she'd left for me to follow, it was time to start listening. Because if the cremation logs were right, the woman who'd raised me to question everything, who taught me that numbers never lie, was still out there somewhere in the desert night, waiting for her son to figure out the puzzle she'd left behind. Back at the apartment, Jonah Park was elbow-deep in circuit boards, his black hair falling across wire-rimmed glasses. The coffee table looked like Radio Shack had exploded, monitors, cables, blinking LEDs everywhere. "You look like hell," he said without looking up. "Funeral that bad?" I dropped onto the couch, Lucky curling against my side. "I need your help with something insane." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to Marina's Christmas voice memos. "Someone thinks there's a code hidden in these lullabies." "Someone?"
It's complicated. Marina's voice filled the room, soft and melodic. Duérmete, mi niño, duérmete, mi sol.
The familiar song brought back memories of fevered nights and thunderstorms. Jonah listened with coding intensity, fingers drumming patterns. Played again, and the next one. After cycling through all 5 recordings, his eyes got that gleam he got when spotting patterns in data. The intervals, he said, scribbling numbers. She's jumping octaves deliberately. These patterns match storage mart numbering systems. Row letters, unit numbers. He pulled up a map overlaying storage facilities. Taos Facility, Unit 247. The same numbers from the text. My heart raced. The rhyme scheme, too, he continued, switching notepads. Maps to 3729. A combination. Your mother turned lullabies into a treasure map. An hour later, we stood before Unit 247 in the desert night. The combination worked. Inside, a banker's box, Marina's denim jacket, and a post-it note. If I don't make it, find Nia Begay. Lucky pressed his nose to the jacket, whining with joy. The scent was recent. Marina had been here within days. We need to go, Jonah whispered, spotting approaching headlights. But I had what Marina left me. Ledgers, evidence, names, the truth hidden in lullabies and love. The tribal police substation outside Santa Fe looked like it had been built from the same red earth as the mesas surrounding it. Inside, Officer Nia Begay sat behind a metal desk scarred with coffee rings and case files, her dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. A missing persons board dominated one wall, photos of elders, young men, mothers who'd simply vanished. "You're Marina Ridge's son," she said without looking up from her paperwork. Not a question. "How did you—" "Your mother called me 3 weeks ago. Said if anything happened to her, you'd come looking." Nia finally raised her eyes, studying me with the careful attention of someone who'd been burned by bad tips before. "She also said you'd bring proof." I set the banker's box on her desk, keeping the original ledgers but showing her the photocopies. Chain of custody documents, payment records, names of people whose families never got their ashes back. Nia's expression shifted as she scanned the pages. "Jesus, this connects to 2 cases on my board. Robert Yazzie and Elena Montoya. Families are still waiting for remains." She looked up sharply. "Where did your mother get this?" "She was a forensic bookkeeper at Rio Mesa Research Logistics, found falsified forms, payments to shell clinics." My phone buzzed. Dale calling. I let it go to voicemail. The text said, "Not to trust my dad." Smarted rice. Nia pulled up a file on her computer. "Dale Ridge owes money to Redline Ruiz, who runs a car lot that's actually a front for Art Salazar's logistics drivers. Your father's been taking consulting fees to look the other way when hospice vans swap license plates at his shop." The betrayal hit like a gut punch, but part of me wasn't surprised. Dale had always been good at justifying his compromises. "Here's the problem," Nia continued. "Reina Valdez and Art Salazar have political cover. Campaign contributions, charity boards, the works. I need more than photocopies to move against them." She leaned back in her chair. "I need originals, corroborating witnesses, and someone willing to testify who isn't already dead or disappeared." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Dale. "Stop poking around. You don't know who you're messing with." I showed Nia the message. She frowned. "When did your mother supposedly die?" 3 days ago." "And when did she leave this storage unit?" The scent was fresh. Lucky, my dog. He went crazy, recognizing her smell. Nia nodded slowly. "So either she's alive, or someone wants you to think she is." "Either way, they're escalating." She stood up, grabbing her jacket from the chair. "I'll start the warrant paperwork for the hospice and warehouse, but I need you to promise me something. No cowboy stunts. This isn't a movie. These people have already made your mother disappear once." "What if she's alive?" "Then we find her the right way, with backup and legal authority." Nia's voice softened slightly. "Your mother was smart enough to fake her death and leave you breadcrumbs. Trust that she's smart enough to stay hidden until we can make this official." As I walked to my truck, Dale's voicemail played through my earpiece. "Mijo, please, just come home. We need to talk before this gets out of hand." But looking at the evidence box in my passenger seat, at Lucky's alert posture as he scanned the parking lot, I knew it was out of hand. Had been from the moment Marina typed those 4 words, "I'm alive." The question now was whether Dale was trying to protect me or control me, and whether I'd live long enough to learn the difference. Father Tomas Herrera's street parish looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. A converted gas station with Christmas lights strung year-round and Santos painted on plywood instead of carved from wood. Votive candles flickered in baby food jars, casting dancing shadows across the walls where families had taped photographs of the missing. The priest himself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much. He listened to my story without interruption, occasionally nodding as I explained about Marina's ledgers and the families who'd never received their loved ones' ashes. "I've been waiting for someone to ask these questions," he said finally, disappearing into a back room. When he returned, he carried a battered Nike shoebox held together with rubber bands. Mass cards, notes from families, names of people whose donations never came home. He set the box on a folding table between 2 rows of plastic chairs. Inside were dozens of index cards, scraps of paper, even napkins with names written in careful Spanish script. I pulled out Marina's ledger copies and began cross-referencing. Jesus! Roberto Yassi, Elena Montoya, Jose Herrera. No relation to the priest, but Father Thomas remembered him anyway. These names are all in my mother's records, specific dates, transfer amounts, everything.
Your mother came here 2 months ago, Father Tomas said quietly. Wanted to know if I'd heard stories about families being told their relatives were too damaged for viewing, too sick for visitation in their final days. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. Lucky's ears perked up, then flattened against his skull. Through the window, I spotted a black SUV idling at the street corner, its windows too dark to see through. "How many families?" I asked, still sorting through cards. 43 that I know of. Probably more in the rural parishes. Father Tomas moved to the window, his expression grim. All of them told the same story, rushed through the process, pressured to sign donation papers, promised their loved ones with health medical research. My phone buzzed with a text from Jonah. Hospital billing APIs showed dummy consultations tied to Rena's badge. She's been coding fake medical visits for months. The pattern was becoming clear. Target vulnerable families, rush them through bogus medical consultations, pressure them into donation agreements, then sell the bodies to research facilities while telling families the remains were too damaged to return. "Father," I said, standing up as the SUV's engine revved, "I need permission to share these names with the police." "You have it, but remember," he gripped my shoulder as headlights swept across the parish windows, "these aren't just names on your mother's ledger. They were someone's grandfather, someone's child. They deserve dignity in death, even if they didn't get it in their final days." I stuffed the relevant cards into my jacket pocket and headed for the back door. Lucky already ahead of me and growling low. The SUV was moving now, creeping along the street like a predator, testing the fence line. "There's a drainage ditch behind the old Texaco," Father Tomas whispered. "Follows the road for half a mile, comes out near the highway." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "Find them," he said simply. "All of them. Bring them home." As Lucky and I slipped into the desert night, I could hear the SUV's doors slamming shut behind us. But clutched in my jacket were 43 reasons to keep running, 43 families who deserved answers. Marina had given me the numbers. Father Tomas had given me the names. Now I just had to live long enough to make them count. The body shop after midnight felt like a tomb. Tools gleaming under dust covers, the smell of motor oil and old cigarettes hanging in the still air. Dale sat on a milk crate beside the hydraulic lift, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying too much weight. A faded boxing poster peeled from the wall behind him, some welterweight champion from 30 years ago when Dale still believed in fair fights. "You came," he said without looking up. Lucky stayed by the door, hackles raised, not trusting the space or the man. "You said it was important." I kept my distance, Father Tomas's words echoing in my head. "These people have already made your mother disappear once." "Mijo, you need to stop asking questions. You don't understand what you're dealing with." "Then explain it to me." I pulled out one of the mass cards from Father Tomas's box. Roberto Yazzi, 83 years old. His family's been waiting 6 months for his ashes. His name's in Marina's ledger with a payout to a shell clinic. Dale's face went gray. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter? Marina documented everything, Dad. The fake consultations, the rushed donations, the families who never got their loved ones back." My voice cracked. "Did you know?" He stood up slowly, wiping grease-stained hands on his jeans. "I took consulting money, $500 a month, to let hospice vans swap plates in my bay after hours. I thought it was just logistics, paperwork bullshit." "You didn't ask questions?" "I needed the money." The words exploded out of him. "Redline was breathing down my neck, threatening to break my legs. Marina's medical bills were drowning us. 500 bought us time." "And Reina?" Dale's expression shuddered. "She said it was temporary. Said the vans just needed a clean place to handle transfers, avoid the red tape at the hospital loading docks." The bay door rattled and both of us turned. Redline Ruiz stepped through, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. He was smaller than I'd expected, wiry and sharp-dressed, with a kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Dale, hermano, I didn't tell you you were having a family meeting." His gaze fixed on me with uncomfortable intensity. "This must be Evan. Heard you've been making the rounds, asking uncomfortable questions." "Just trying to understand what happened to my mother." "Your mother stuck her nose where it didn't belong. Reina made life difficult for people who'd been very patient with your father's financial situation." Dale stepped between us. "Leave him out of this." "Too late for that." Reina pulled out his phone, showing a photo of me at the storage facility. "Your boy's been busy. Found Mama's little treasure hunt. Talked to cops. Visited that bleeding heart priest."
My blood turned to ice. They'd been watching everything. "Here's what's gonna happen," Redline continued. "You're going to forget whatever fairy tales Marina left in those boxes. You're going to stop bothering Father Tomas and his grieving families. And you're going to let the dead stay dead." "And if I don't?" Redline's smile widened. "Then we stop being patient with Dale's deaths. And accidents happen to people who don't listen." The threat hung in the air like engine exhaust. Dale's face was a mask of shame and fear, caught between protecting his son and protecting himself. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd made a choice every month for the past year. Money over truth. Comfort over conscience. "I can't do that," I said quietly. Dale's shoulders sagged. "Evan, please." "I'm sorry, Dad. But Marina didn't raise me to look the other way." Lucky growled as Redline's men moved closer, but I was already backing toward the rear exit, the mass cards burning in my pocket like accusations. The war for my father's soul was over. Marina had already won it, one lullaby at a time. The stakeout started at 11 p.m. Nia's unmarked unit parked across from Our Lady of the Desert Hospice with a clear view of the intake bay. Rain drummed against the windshield while Jonah worked his laptop in the back seat, fingers flying over code that would give us eyes on the traffic cameras without anyone knowing we were watching. "2 vans so far," Nia murmured, adjusting her binoculars. "Both legitimate transfers from what I can see, but it's early yet." Lucky rode shotgun beside me, nose pressed to the window, that low growl rumbling in his chest whenever headlights swept across the hospice entrance. I kept one hand on Marina's rosary in my pocket, the beads warm from my nervous fidgeting. At 12:47 a.m., everything changed. A white van pulled into the bay, same model as the one from Marina's funeral, but different plates. Marina Valdez emerged from the side entrance, clipboard in hand, moving with clinical efficiency. She spoke briefly with the driver, then both disappeared inside. "That's not protocol," Nia said, lowering her binoculars. "Transfer vans don't unload during shift change." 20 minutes later, they reappeared, wheeling a gurney with a body bag. But instead of loading it into the same van, they transferred it to a second vehicle that had arrived while we watched, a refrigerated truck with Rio Mesa Research Logistics painted on the side. "Tag swap," Jonah whispered from the back seat. "The hospice paperwork will show the body went out in the white van, but it's actually leaving in the truck." Nia was already reaching for her radio when Lucky suddenly bolted from the truck. I'd cracked the window for air, and the one-eyed healer squeezed through like liquid, hitting the pavement running. "Lucky, no!" But he was already across the street, nose to the ground, following some scent trail only he could detect. I chased after him, hearing Nia curse behind me. Lucky made straight for the intake bay where Rena was signing off on paperwork. The moment she saw him, her face went white. "Get that animal away from here!" she snapped. But Lucky was already pawing at the door, whining and circling with the same excitement he'd shown at the storage unit. The scent. Marina's scent. She'd been here. My phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. "I see Rena. Where are you?" I typed back quickly. "Hospice intake. Where are you?" The response came immediately. "Not safe. Go to the water meters behind Rio Mesa. 4 a.m. I pocketed the phone as Rena finished her paperwork and stalked toward us. "This is a medical facility. You can't be here." "Just collecting my dog," I said, clipping Lucky's leash. But I caught the license plate of the Rio Mesa truck as it pulled away. New Mexico commercial tags, recent registration. Nia appeared at my elbow, flashing her badge. "Officer Begay, Tribal Police. We're investigating some irregularities in your transfer protocols." Rena's expression shifted to professional concern. "Of course. How can I help?" "We'll be in touch," Nia said smoothly. "Thank you for your cooperation." As we walked back to the car, Lucky kept looking over his shoulder at the intake bay, tail stiff with agitation. Whatever Marina's plan was, whatever had brought her through that door, we were getting close to the truth. And at 4 a.m., behind a warehouse where the dead were sorted like inventory, I might finally see my mother again. Pre-dawn wind cut across the Taos Mesa like a blade, carrying the smell of sage and distant snow. The Rio Mesa warehouse squatted against the horizon like a concrete tumor, its loading bays dark except for security lights that painted everything in harsh yellow. Jonah killed the exterior cameras with 90 seconds of looped footage, while Naya and I approached the utility corridor. My hands shook as I cut through the chain-link fence, not from cold, but from the certainty that everything would change in the next few minutes. "Stay close," Naya whispered, drawing her service weapon. "And if I say run, you run." The water meter access led to a service tunnel that smelled of rust and disinfectant. Emergency lighting cast sickly green shadows as we moved toward the main floor. Through a steel door marked authorized personnel only, I could hear the hum of refrigeration units. We emerged into a warehouse cathedral, 30-foot ceilings, rows of stainless steel tables, and shipping crates stacked like metallic coffins. A banner hung from the rafters, Community Donation Partnership, Advancing Medical Research. "Jesus," Naya breathed. I spotted a crate labeled with Marina's cremation tag number. Empty. But the smell, formaldehyde and something else, something organic, made my stomach turn. Footsteps echoed from the office level above. Then Reina Valdez appeared at the top of the stairs, calm as marble, like she'd been expecting us. "You're trespassing," she called down, her voice carrying easily in the vast space. "We have a warrant coming," Naya replied, though we both knew it wouldn't arrive in time. More footsteps. Art Salazar descended the stairs in an expensive suit, hands clasped behind his back like a museum curator. "Officer Begay, Mr. Ridge, I'm disappointed it's come to this." "Where are they?" I demanded. "The bodies, the family's loved ones." Art smiled. "Research facilities in Arizona, Texas, Colorado, all perfectly legal. We provide a valuable service, advancing medical knowledge while helping families avoid expensive burial costs. Without their consent. Consent is a complicated concept when people are grieving. He gestured to the banner. We make it easier for them. Remove the burden of choice. Sirens wailed in the distance. Naya's backup finally arriving. Raina was already moving toward a side exit, but Art just stood there, unperturbed. You think a few copied ledgers will bring down a legitimate business? I have lawyers, judges, politicians who depend on our charitable contributions. Your mother learned that lesson the hard way. My phone buzzed. A location pin less than a mile away. Marina. The sirens were getting closer, but I was already moving toward the exit, leaving Naya to handle the evidence and arrests. Because somewhere in the desert night, my mother was waiting, alive, hidden, and ready to finally come home. The trailer sat under a tilt-up sunset sky, wind chimes singing in the desert breeze. Ocotillo shadows stretched across the hard pan like reaching fingers. I parked beside a battered Honda Civic with plates I didn't recognize, my heart hammering against my ribs. Lucky bolted from the truck before I could grab his leash, charging toward the aluminum steps with a joy that made my chest ache. The door opened, and there she was, Marina, thinner but steady, wearing the same denim jacket from the storage unit. Lucky exploded into full-body wagging, whines pressed into her knees like prayers. She knelt and buried her face in her fur, whispering words I couldn't hear but felt in my bones. Mijo, her voice cracked as she looked up at me. You found the lullabies. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. 3 days of believing she was dead, of chasing ghosts through storage units and morgues, and here she was, alive, breathing, real. How long have you been hiding? I finally managed. 2 weeks. Had to let them think I was gone, had to draw the heat away from you. Art threatened you, Evan. Said if I didn't stop digging, you'd have an accident. So I disappeared. Tires crunched on gravel. Dale's truck pulled up and my father climbed out, moving like an old man. His face was bruised, lip split, knuckles scraped raw. He wouldn't tell them where you were, Marina said quietly. Redline worked him for an hour. Dale took a beating rather than give you up. My father stopped at the bottom of the steps, eyes wet. I'm sorry, mijo, for all of it. The money, the lies, putting you in danger. Inside the trailer, Marina had everything. Copies of the ledgers, witness statements, a taped confession from a Rio Mesa driver who'd grown sick of the body trade. I've been building the case from hiding, she explained, waiting for the right moment to surface. Naya's radio crackled through her open truck window. SWAT had cleared the warehouse. Raina was in custody. Art had vanished, but they'd seized enough evidence to unravel the entire network. It's over, I said, pulling Marina close. She smelled like sage and motor oil and home.
No, she said, looking at the box of evidence. It's just beginning. We have 43 families to call. 43 people to bring home. Lucky curled between us, finally a peace. Outside, the desert wind carried the promise of rain, washing the mesa clean for whatever came next. Blue-red strobes painted the I-25 warehouse like a crime scene Christmas, washing across the faces of families who'd gathered outside the perimeter. Father Tomas moved among them with quiet dignity, holding hands and whispering prayers. The wind carried the scent of rain and sage across the mesa. Inside, Nia coordinated with the entry team as they cataloged evidence, crates of falsified documents, refrigeration units, shipping manifests that read like inventory lists. Each box opened revealed another family's stolen grief. Another name from Father Tomas's shoebox finally accounted for. 12 bodies recovered, Nia recorded, her voice tight with controlled anger. Labeled for shipment to research facilities in 3 states, all of them listed as unclaimed donations on Rio Mesa paperwork. Raina sat in the back of a patrol car, staring straight ahead with clinical detachment. She'd lawyer up within minutes of arrest, but the evidence was overwhelming. Cassie Quinn arrived voluntarily, ready to testify about the contracts she'd been pressured to sign. Art Salazar had vanished like smoke, but Redline flipped the moment they found him at his car lot. Art's got a compound in Costa Rica.
been moving money offshore for months through water rights investments. Dale surrendered himself at the county courthouse the next morning, flanked by a public defender and carrying a written statement. His testimony about the plate-swapping operation would help prosecutors connect a logistics chain from hospice intake to interstate shipment. At the press conference, Marina stood beside Father Tomas and the families, her voice steady as bedrock. "We're establishing a victims fund to help families recover remains and pursue civil remediation. Every person taken from you deserves to come home." The cameras captured her strength, but I saw the exhaustion in her shoulders, the weight of carrying 43 families' hopes. Later, as the media packed up and the crowd dispersed, we sat in the truck watching desert lightning flash across the mountains. Lucky slept between us, finally calm after days of chaos. "What happens now?" I asked. Marina pulled out a notebook, more lullabies, more codes. "Father Tomas says there are other parishes, other missing families. The investigation is just starting." Rain began to patter against the windshield, washing dust from the glass. Somewhere in the night, 43 families were getting phone calls that would change everything. News that their loved ones were coming home at last. Art Salazar might be beyond our reach for now, but the network he had built was crumbling. The desert had its own justice, patient and inexorable as erosion. And Marina, forensic bookkeeper, master of hidden codes, my mother who had faked death to protect the living, was ready to decode every secret he had buried in the sand.